On this episode of The Advance, I'm Brandon Waltens, sitting here, of course, like always, with Michael Sullivan.
Like always, you say, with this kind of ugh.
Yeah, recanting, just talking a little bit about the college football from this last weekend, and Baylor didn't play, so we had a good week. Longhorns had a good week. Aggies had a mixed week, I guess, because they won the game, but Texas also won. So that makes it
but
sort
it's
of
okay.
A mix.
It's okay if Texas wins as long as we win.
Yeah.
The A&M game was the best part about the A&M game. The win is always nice, right?
Sure.
But this time you had the Aggie players not trying to beat themselves with penalties.
Yeah.
So apparently, Coach Elko's push for making them donate to some CABO fund for the whatever it was, CABO fund he had joked about a week ago. Apparently paid off. Whatever they did. They got those penalties down. Now, if only Republicans could figure out how to not shoot themselves in the foot, that might be useful.
Well, we've got an interesting fight that we're going to be watching. I mean, not just this week. We're going to talk about some of these stories that are coming up this week, but this is a fight that is going to be taking place in the coming weeks and months, at the very least. And that's been the fight for closing the Texas primaries. Now, this has been something that Republican activists for a long time have called for. Just in the last convention last year, the Republican Party they changed their rules to say, okay, we're going to close our primaries, which all that means is that we're going to only allow registered Republicans to vote. So no longer are we going to allow Democrats to come and vote in the Republican primary and meddle in those elections. Something that they have said they've seen actual effects of. The biggest example that repeatedly gets brought up is if you look at the runoff election for Dade Phelan last year,
right.
Where you had him win by a very slim, just a few hundred votes. And then if you go back and you look, you see that, okay, well, there were well more than enough people with Democrat voting history that you could say very, very likely that Democrats went and voted in the Republican primary to vote against a more conservative candidate. And Phelan's not the only example, but that's an example.
And there was an explicit effort.
Yeah.
By Democrats. You had Democrat legislators going in, the Democrat apparatchiks going in, identifying people for that purpose. So it's not it just happened to be this election, Billy, who'd always been voting Democrat, decided he was going to vote Republican. No. These are people who are Democrats who made a purposeful effort to come in and play in the primary.
Yeah. And so this is an issue that the majority of Republican primary voters, as you can imagine, agree with, right? 73% when it was actually put on the ballot. And that was without any real, explanation or campaign for it. That was just essentially those propositions, a poll. So 73% of Republican voters in the last primary said they want to see this happen. The Republican Party of Texas delegates have said they want to see it happen. The Republican Party of Texas instituted these rules. They called on the Secretary of State, Jane Nelson, who's appointed by, of course, Governor Greg Abbott, confirmed by the Senate, called on her to implement this change as the facilitator of the state's elections. And they had received really no word. Really nothing had happened on it. And so you saw in September, the party filing a lawsuit against the Secretary of State, saying, no, you need to work with us to close these primaries. And you had a very shocking thing, something that doesn't happen a lot, which is that you had the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, actually stepping in and filing a motion to side with not the Secretary of State, who he normally would be representing in cases like these, right? But actually siding with the party, saying, no, the party has a right to free association. They want their primaries closed from Democrat influence. This is something that they should be able to do.
And you had, I had kind of assumed, right? Always be careful with assuming things. I had kind of assumed that, well, if the AG sides with the party, that the Secretary of State and the rest of kind of the officialdom Republicans are going to line up also in kind of the same, and in his filing, the Attorney General's office, referenced all these court decisions, the precedent out there for allowing parties to say, hey, we only want our party members picking our party nominees. Remember, that's what the primary is. The primary is not like, the round one of the election season. No. The primaries are where the parties pick their nominees for the real election that happens in November, right? In the same way, the University of Texas does not let Mike Elko and the rest of the A&M coaching staff go and recruit their players and pick who's going to be on the offensive line, the defensive line starters. You don't do that. In the real world, your opponents don't pick your candidates. But with the primaries in Texas, the Democrats have been allowed to do just that. So you would expect that Republican officialdom would have gone along. Instead, Brandon, as you reported late on Friday, Secretary of State Jane Nelson, an appointee of Governor Greg Abbott, she announced that she was opposed to the Attorney General's move, and she was opposed to the Republican Party trying to protect its primary from Democrat interference. So this is where Greg Abbott is going to have to make a choice at some time fairly quickly. Who is he going to side with? Is he going to side with the Republican Party and the grassroots activists, or is he going to side with his Secretary of State, who is fighting this GOP initiative? It's going to be see where the governor comes out here over the next, as this case moves through. It's going to be interesting to see where the governor stands on this, because the governor has seems to enjoy at the moment a lot of support from the grassroots, also support from Republican activists at the moment. And this is kind of one of those areas where, when you get closer to an election, people go from caring about policy to caring about elections. And I think this is where the governor is going to have to decide where does he want to position himself on the spectrum of the primaries. In the past, you could kind of ignore the issue, but now it's an active lawsuit where the AG's taken an active position in court, and the Secretary of State taking an active position in court. I think the governor's going to have to take a position fairly soon on this.
Real interesting. I mean, it's this playing out right now, right? This is the party. You got the party and the Attorney General right here. You got the Secretary of State there. These warring elephants. Finally, that's why we got them there. To illustrate just that point. This isn't the only lawsuit. I mean, surprise that Attorney General Ken Paxton's been involved in. Certainly, he's been involved in many and continues to be. Even as he'll be leaving office, in a year or so here. But one lawsuit that he did file today, and is a very interesting case, is against a man named Malcolm Tanner in Loving County. Now, this is somebody who has essentially gotten some interesting attention because it's sort of weird. Loving County, if folks don't know where it is, it's sort of West Texas. It's basically, if you think of the Panhandle, it's right southwest of there, bordering New Mexico. It's a county with, I think, less than 100 people. It's the least populous county in the state. Right. And you've had this Democrat activist, essentially moving up there saying, we're going to provide free homes for people who want to move up here, and we're going to take over the county, which with those numbers, as you can imagine, you don't need that many people to move there to do, right? Right. Well, the Attorney General filing a lawsuit today against him for, in addition to some other things, but mainly for, surprise, surprise, these housing and this whole project doesn't appear to be, at least according to the allegations, they're on the level, not sanitary, not following proper codes, and essentially saying this is not up to the bar there. And so, we'll see what comes out of that. But, for such a small county, people have pointed out correctly so that, decisions that are made in that judicial district up there and decisions made by the county courthouse, et cetera, do actually have some real serious outsized impacts because of where it's located, because of its relation to the oil and gas trade, right? And even its proximity to New Mexico as well.
This is an interesting case, and one where I think that I think as Republicans, as conservatives, as liberty-leaning free marketeers, there's that a lot of those folks will have a very natural kind of feeling to this kind of case. On the one hand, you say, oh, well, wait a second. If somebody wants to buy property and move people in and have their own little private, not hurting anybody else, property rights, kind of thing. On the other hand, there are rights of other people involved here, and particularly when someone is doing this for the intention of messing up a community. Suddenly, you say, well, wait a second, your rights end, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose happens to be, right? And I think that's kind of what we're seeing play out here is this conflict between existing homeowners, property owners, businesses, and others who've made a long-standing conscious choice to live there and to operate their community they have. And now here comes a left-wing activist wanting to do some kind of shady things for shady purposes. I think this is where, again, that conflict, that initial, concern you feel when you hear about these kind of things. You say, okay, wait a second, there are other principles at stake.
Switching gears here to something that's not dealing with a lawsuit, but actually dealing with a topic that we've talked a lot about, especially over the last several weeks: higher education. Some leftists at the University of Texas are not so happy with some of the recent decisions the school has made, and they're organizing a protest. Robert Montoya is working on that story with Adam Kahn as well. But what do you know about it? What can folks expect?
This is so wild. So UT, often thought of as the leftist liberal institution of higher education in Texas. The Board of Regents and the leadership at UT Austin, probably fair to say, tracking to the right, or at a minimum, trying to stabilize the ship.
The bar is very low.
The bar is very low, to be very clear. For example, later this week, UT Austin is hosting a seminar devoted to talking about the problems of communism. Talking about the need to stop whitewashing the Soviet Union experience, talking about the importance of teaching the truth about what happened in the Soviet Union and during that communist era. I mean, wild, trying to instruct people to speak the truth about, the millions of people murdered by Stalin, all the stuff that's been kind of covered up in academia for years. But we need to speak honestly about communism. And so it is fascinating to me that it's this week that's taking place at UT. You have this leftist protest coming in. They want to fight the fact that UT has agreed with the Trump administration that hiring of professors needs to be based on merit.
The horror.
The horror of merit-based hiring. The horror of merit-based admissions, saying that we need to make sure people are admitted to UT based on their qualifications, not on family relationships or politics or other weird things. And so it's fascinating that the calendar confluence of these leftists wanting to have a protest saying, no, we want preferential treatment for politically savvy individuals, lefties like ourselves. At the same time, you've got UT saying, "Hey, we're going to talk the truth about communism." It couldn't be a better juxtaposition of a calendar.
Well, exciting stuff. And I know that there's certainly going to be a lot more coming out of higher education, as well as we've got Travis Morgan doing a little bit of wrap up of some of the stuff that was talked about during the redistricting trial and what folks can expect going forward. And so there's a lot to look forward to this week. You can follow us, of course, at texasscorecard.com. Thank you for joining.